King Nebuchadnezzar was the most well-known and powerful emperor of the Babylonian Empire. He reigned for approximately 43 years. Nebuchadnezzar was the son of Nabopolassar, who had also been king of Babylon before him. His wife was Amadis of Media. Before we talk about who Nebuchadnezzar was, we need to know that this same name was used by four different Babylonian kings. Among these monarchs, King Nebuchadnezzar of the Bible is known in history as Nebuchadnezzar II. In fact, he is the only one of the four kings who is mentioned in biblical texts. Despite being called Nebuchadnezzar II in history, he has nothing to do with Nebuchadnezzar I. In fact, Nebuchadnezzar first reigned between the years 127 and 107 before Christ, more than 500 years before the Nebuchadnezzar of the Bible. But before continuing with the video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a video and leave your like. It's very important for the channel, so let's go. The meaning of the name Nebuchadnezzar raises some doubts among scholars. The best suggestions say that Nebuchadnezzar means Nebo, protect the borders, or Nebo, protect my crown. The original name is the Babylonian Nabuchodonosor. This name was transliterated in the biblical text into Hebrew, Aramaic, and, finally, into Greek, in the Septuagint Greek version of the Old Testament. Nebuchadnezzar succeeded his father, Nabopolassar, on the throne of Babylon. He ruled the Babylonian Empire between 604 BC and 562 BC. Before assuming the throne, still as crown prince, Nebuchadnezzar served as commander of the Babylonian army in some military interventions. His father was the founder of the Chaldean dynasty. He took advantage of the weakening of Assyria and managed to become king of Babylon in 626 BC. Due to a Medo-Babylonian alliance, he also destroyed the city of Nineveh and then advanced against Haran. After Assyria fell, Pharaoh Necho's Egypt came to dominate Judah completely. At that time, Jewish rulers were appointed and removed as they were advantageous to Egypt. But finally in June 605 BC, the Egyptian forces were defeated at Carchemish by then Prince Nebuchadnezzar. In August 605, Nabopolassar died. So Nebuchadnezzar stopped the campaign he led and crossed the desert to return and assumed the throne of Babylon on September 6, 605 BC. Here it is worth saying that the city of Babylon achieved great prestige and power in approximately 1850 BC, and then went into decline. It was only then, with Nebuchadnezzar, more than 1,000 years later, that the city regained its full glory. For this reason, the empire led by Nebuchadnezzar is known as the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Still in 605 BC, after defeating the Egyptians in Carchemish, King Nebuchadnezzar advanced against Jehoiakim, king of Judah, to Kings 24:12, to Chronicles 36:5-7. This was the first of 3 Babylonian invasions against Judah. It was also on this occasion that Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were taken captive by Nebuchadnezzar. Jehoiakim submitted to King Nebuchadnezzar and was temporarily loyal to him. However, after 3 years, King Jehoiakim rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar and transferred his allegiance to the Egyptians. Despite the constant warnings of the prophet Jeremiah 27:9-11. It was then that in 597 BC Nebuchadnezzar marched against Palestine and surrounded the city of Jerusalem in the second Babylonian invasion against Judah. On that occasion, Nebuchadnezzar captured King Jehoiachin, who had been in power for just 3 months after the death of his father, the rebel Jehoiakim. In Jehoiachin's place, King Nebuchadnezzar appointed Mattaniah, who came to be called Zedekiah according to Kings 24:17-2, Chronicles 30-6-10. Nebuchadnezzar also deported the deposed King Jehoiachin to Babylon, along with all Jews who might try to promote a rebellion according to Kings 20-12-16 to Chronicles 30-6-10. Jeremiah 20-20-4-30, 50-20-8. King Nebuchadnezzar sacked Solomon's temple and captured enormous spoils of war. Zedekiah invited loyalty to Nebuchadnezzar for a time, but later he too rebelled by giving in to pressure from the people. It is worth mentioning that Jeremiah often advised the people to stay away from rebellion. Interestingly, during this period, a false prophet named Ananias prophesied that within 2 years all the captives would return from Babylonian captivity. Jeremiah denounced this false prophecy and announced to the people that the Lord revealed to him that the exile in Babylon would be quite prolonged. Jeremiah 20-9:1-20-3 closing parenthesis. Even after much advice from the prophet of the Lord, Zedekiah finally rebelled against King Nebuchadnezzar according to Kings 20-4:20. 2 Chronicles 30-6:13-16. Jeremiah 53:3. Then, in approximately 587 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar began to besiege Jerusalem according to Kings 20-1:1. Jeremiah 39:1-52:4. Ezekiel 24:12. The city of Judah endured the Babylonian siege for a time, until it fell completely under the rule of King Nebuchadnezzar. On that occasion, another large deportation of captives took place to Babylon. Only the poorest Jews were left behind according to Kings 25:8-17. 2 Chronicles 30-6:17-20. Jeremiah 30-9:9-10, 50-12-20-3. Jerusalem was razed and the temple destroyed. The rebellious king Zedekiah was captured by Nebuchadnezzar and asked to oversee the execution of his own sons. After that, his eyes went blind and he was taken in chains to Babylon, where he ended up dying according to Kings 25:5-7. Jeremiah 39:4-8, 52:8-11. After destroying Jerusalem, Nebuchadnezzar appointed another Jewish governor, Gedaliah. However, Gedaliah was later murdered due to yet another conspiracy against Babylonian rule over Judah. King Nebuchadnezzar also led several offensives against other nations, for example, against Tyre between 585 and 572 BC, and against Egypt in approximately 568 BC. Ezekiel 20-6-20-8, 20-9:18. King Nebuchadnezzar was not only a great military strategist, but he was also an important builder while ruling the Babylonian Empire. Archaeological expeditions have already proven that King Nebuchadnezzar transformed Babylon into a very imposing city. While fortifying the city's military defenses, Nebuchadnezzar also beautified Babylon. He restored many temples in the cities that were under his rule, and built an avenue through Babylon for the procession of Marduk, a pagan Babylonian god. Nebuchadnezzar also built new canals to irrigate the city, and his palace was splendid. Daniel 1-4. Without a doubt, its most famous and controversial construction is the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. These gardens consisted of a group of trees planted on elevated sidewalks that were supported by large pillars that simulated a mountainous region. Nebuchadnezzar is believed to have made the gardens as a gift for his wife Ametis of Media. She was a native of a land surrounded by mountains. However, there is a lot of discussion about the real existence of this garden. Nebuchadnezzar's reign forms the historical context of much of the books of the prophets Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel. In fact, it is the book of Daniel that provides the best biblical information about who Nebuchadnezzar was. The prophet Daniel himself played an important role during the time of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. He was one of the prominent people in Babylon, as were his friends Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Daniel 1-3. In the biblical narrative, we realize that King Nebuchadnezzar was an instrument in the hands of God, which he used to punish nations, including the people of Judah. In the book of Jeremiah, for example, we read more than once the expression Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, my servant. Jeremiah 20-5:9, 27:6. This does not mean that Nebuchadnezzar was a devoted servant of the Lord. On the contrary, he was a pagan king, but he had been appointed by God to fulfill the role of agent of his judgment against the unbelieving nations. King Nebuchadnezzar's pagan religiosity can be clearly seen in the episode in which he condemned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to the fiery furnace. This happened after the 3 young Hebrews withheld enthusiasm from the statue that the king of Babylon had built. Daniel 3. After the supernatural deliverance given by God to the 3 young men, King Nebuchadnezzar appears in the biblical text regularizing that those men were servants of the Most High God. Daniel 3:27. However, this statement did not assert that the Babylonian monarch had been converted to the Lord, but only that he had recognized that the God of those men was superior to other deities. In other words, This means that the biblical text does not show a monotheistic concept on the part of Nebuchadnezzar. The book of Daniel also describes the dreams that King Nebuchadnezzar had. The first dream is recorded in Daniel 2. The king of Babylon dreamed of a large statue made of various materials: gold, silver, bronze, iron, and clay. This dream talked about the rise and fall of certain world powers. However, its main message concerned the way in which God was sovereignly directing history according to his purposes. The dream disturbed the king, and he summoned the magicians and enchanters so that they could reveal and interpret the dream. Since he had not told anyone the content of his own dream, most likely because he did not remember it, Daniel, demonstrating that he was greatly blessed by God, was the only one capable of revealing and interpreting the king's dream. This dream occurred in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. The second dream is recorded in Daniel 4. This dream occurred at a time when Nebuchadnezzar was at the height of his power. In the 43rd year of his reign, he dreamed of a big tree being cut down, but I couldn't interpret the dream. So once again it was up to Daniel, used by God, to interpret the king's dream. This dream caused the emperor of Babylon to be punished by God with a time of madness due to his pride. Chapter 4 of the book of the prophet Daniel records the episode in which King Nebuchadnezzar went through a period of madness as a result of his pride. Before, he had been warned by the prophet Daniel about the mistakes he was making, but the warning had no effect. God punished King Nebuchadnezzar for a period of 7 times of madness. During this period he behaved like an animal. That is, he believed he was an animal. Scholars have classified this disease as a possible severe case of clinical lycanthropy. When the time determined by God ended, King Nebuchadnezzar recovered his understanding and gave glory to the Lord. There is no way to tell whether King Nebuchadnezzar was converted or not. That's because, in fact, the Bible doesn't say anything about this. The fact that King Nebuchadnezzar is called by God my servant only means that he was part of the Lord's sovereign plan. This means that our God is Lord over everything and everyone, and uses even a megalomaniac king, like Nebuchadnezzar, to fulfill his eternal purposes. To defend a possible conversion of Nebuchadnezzar, many people rely on the king's statement after being cured of the illness that affected him as a result of divine punishment. On that occasion he eloquently confessed the sovereignty and majesty of God. Daniel for Cologne 30-30-7 . However, in no text of the Bible is it possible to find King Nebuchadnezzar confessing that the God of Israel is the only God and supreme creator of the entire universe. It is true that Nebuchadnezzar witnessed the supernatural power of the Lord several times. He also spent a long time with the prophet Daniel. But this does not necessarily imply a sincere conversion. The best thing to do is to recognize that nowhere in the Bible is there a clear record about a possible conversion of King Nebuchadnezzar, and defending it would be pure speculation and allegory. It may be that he was converted, or it may be that he was not, so we better keep quiet about it. Babylonian records also say nothing about a conversion of King Nebuchadnezzar, and even if he was converted, obviously such records would never testify to this event. In fact, the records of King Nebuchadnezzar in the Babylonian chronicles always describe him as a very religious man who kept all the precepts of Babylonian paganism. The Babylonian chronicles simply say that he was a great devotee of Marduk. Although there is much archaeological material in Babylonian literature related to King Nebuchadnezzar, records about the last part of his reign are lacking. What is known is that King Nebuchadnezzar died between August and September 562 BC, at approximately 70 years of age. King Nebuchadnezzar was succeeded by his son, Evil Merodach, who reigned for only 2 years. Shortly thereafter, the Babylonian Empire went into decline and finally fell to the Persian. And let us see that King Nebuchadnezzar's biggest mistake was touching the glory of God. Pride is the origin of all the sins of humanity, and the most harmful of them. It was because of him that Lucifer lost his position as anointed guardian cherub and became the devil, who soon found a way to plant this evil seed in the heart of man. It is no coincidence that we constantly come across people like this, arrogant, full of themselves, arrogant, haughty, who believe they are superior to others. Living with them becomes very difficult. Nebuchadnezzar exemplifies this theme well. This has also been the case in the lives of many people. That is, They insist on doing what they want, and, despite being warned and guided to change their behavior, they do not accept listening to the voice of God, to the advice from above, to what God guides. In His Word, humility is the basis of the character of God and those born of Him. Pride is the basis of the character of the devil and those born of the flesh. Lucifer was perfect, full of wisdom and beauty, but he left his heart full of pride and desired to be similar to the Most High. Because of this, he was expelled from heaven. This is what happens to many who achieve success and power. Upon gaining a prominent position, these people begin to boast and look down on others. The big problem is that it is difficult for a proud person to recognize themselves in this condition. And therein lies the reason for their self-destruction, since, if there is no recognition of the error, there is no repentance. Without repentance, there is no salvation. If you liked this video, share it with your family, friends, and subscribe to my channel. May God bless you mightily. I'll wait for you in the next video. A big hug.